As tensions continue to rise between Israel and Tehran, the Jerusalem Post reported the type of military plane that could potentially strike nuclear facilities in Iran should Israel decide to take action against the Islamic Republic regime's nuclear program. Now, to talk about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, could we potentially see a preventative strike by Israel?
We're already seeing them, but we're not seeing anything to the scale that would cause some sort of public reaction from Iran's regime. And what I mean by that is we've seen a series of almost clandestine hits, very targeted hits, right? So Israel is not looking to make this into any sort of escalation. What they're trying to do is twofold. A, deliver a message to Tehran that you're not going to develop a weapon, and if you are, you certainly aren't going to direct it in our direction. And B, they are hitting the facilities that are obviously are progressing in the direction of creating that weapon. And for that reason, we're seeing them again very targeted and underground. The report by the Jerusalem Post talks about a potential strike on Iran's facilities underground should Israel feel like it needs to escalate to a place to absolutely take out their weapons program. We haven't seen that day come yet, but if they would, Israel is in possession of F-35 fighter jets that they got from the United States. A lot of lawmakers that are pro-Israel and have been advocating for Israel's defense, particularly against Iran's regime, have been advocating for Israel to have bunker busters that can go underground and get rid of these facilities in a much more smooth, for lack of a better word, way, and to really know that they have this in their arsenal and to have more security because of the fact. So that's the discussion right now. Obviously, Washington and Jerusalem are in talks. They are communicating more than we know. You know, the Obama administration didn't have a good relationship with Israel. Then you had Trump come in and he had a phenomenal relationship, not just with Israel, but personally with Bibi Netanyahu, the prime minister of Israel. And now Biden, although his foreign policy is very similar to the Obama foreign policy, he does have a better relationship with Israel. He is much more pro-Israel just in his own beliefs. And for that reason, although it's not as public, there is much more conversing back and forth between Israel and the United States. So there is absolute communication, and we'll have to watch and see what Israel deems as the next step in protecting themselves against the threat.
Absolutely. Lisa, the Revolutionary Guards commander says Iran has developed a cruise missile with a range of around 1,650 kilometers. That could definitely pose a threat.
Absolutely, to Israel, if for nothing else. I mean, obviously, that's the small Satan and the United States being the big Satan. Those are the two sworn enemies of Iran's regime. This is the crazy part, Hal. You have Iran right now, 5 months of Iranian people out on the streets protesting. That is the Achilles heel of this regime, knowing that the people want a revolution, the people want regime change. On the international stage, they're somewhat being sanctioned, although I know the European Union and the United States have cold feet about really pushing the Iran regime hard. They would much rather sit down and appease them and get into a deal with them again, of course. But in the meantime, you're not seeing any good behavior by Iran's regime to warrant that kind of deal or appeasement. They're flexing their muscles. They're saying, look at our new weapons. Look at our uranium enrichment that has gone up from 60%, which was already a very high number, to about 84%, which was the report that we had last week. It's mind-boggling to think that any Western nation would believe that they can curb the behavior of this regime, that in this moment, they are actually showing bad behavior. It's like you're trying to punish a child, and instead of being very sorry and trying to change their behavior, they're showing more bad behavior. And that's exactly what we have here. So, you know, the European Union, the United States, the Iranian people are calling on them, a lot of lawmakers calling on them to really change their tune when it comes to Iran's regime, but yet they're very hesitant to do so.
The Palestinian Islamic Jihad movement claimed responsibility for an attack that killed 2 Israeli brothers on Sunday. Lisa, it was the same day the government of Jordan announced that officials from Israel and Palestine met to de-escalate tensions on the ground.
You know, the Palestinian lands and Israel met, and they basically, so you have the West Bank and Gaza, of course, you have Hamas in charge, and you have Mahmoud Abbas in charge, and then you have Israel. They all met in Jordan to discuss de-escalation, and both sides agreed that they do not want more casualties. And in the meantime, of course, you have these terror organizations. Every day they wake up, wanting to kill more Jews. This is what they live off of. This is what gets them high. This is their entire existence. They cannot move forward if they get land, if they get water, if they get healthcare, if they get job. They cannot move forward. And you think about the challenge that Israel has to deal with these, who's in charge of that, right? So even if you're meeting with the leaders, you still have Palestinian Islamic Jihad, you still have members of Hamas, and you still have other Al-Aqsa Brigade and all of these other insurgencies that are, again, they have sworn to take out Jews every single day of their lives. And now they have guns. And before it was throwing guns and grenades and whatever that is in their possession, car rammings, take your car and just ram it into a bunch of Jews at a bus stop. So this is the challenge that is before them. But the one thing I will say is that if we want to connect the dots on your last question, Palestinian Islamic Jihad is directly funded by Iran's regime. So when the United States and the European Union sit there and they kind of twiddle their thumbs and don't know what to do with Iran's regime, this is what's going on. They are funding suicide bombers. They're funding these people. The people who, the gunmen who killed these two innocent young brothers, who is roaming free right now. Once he is found, he is a martyr. He's absolutely considered a hero, rather. And if a family loses a child that they do call a martyr, they get checks every single month from these organizations, pay to slay. And there were lawmakers in this country and in the United States that said we have to stop giving money to the Palestinian authorities because this is what they're doing with that money, whether it's going through UNRWA, the UN organization, or it's going through themselves. The aid that's going there is going towards this terrorism, and this is a prime example of that senseless bloodshed in that region, where two young brothers, a family just really devastated over the weekend over nothing, over just pure hatred.
Pay to slay, unbelievable. Lisa, UK minister says criminal gangs hired by Iran are spying on British Jews and are preparing for potential assassination operations against prominent community members. Tell me more about that.
Right. So this brings it back to your first question about Israel potentially taking out very targeted targets inside Iran. And Iran came back and said, well, what we'll do is find Jews around the world and we will target them. So we'll obviously start with the Jews inside Iran, and that community obviously dwindling, not too many Jews left there. But we'll move towards Israel, and we'll move towards Jews all over the world, and we will support targeted attacks on them. So the UK, this was a leaked investigation where they found out that UK Jews were under surveillance. They were basically mapping them out, where they are, where they hang out, where their synagogues are, where their places of work and residence are, and that they will target them that way. Whether this is intimidation or this is true, this is horrific. No one in this world is safe until this regime is removed, and that's actually the case that we're seeing here. Their tentacles reach very far and wide, and they're supporting terror in the United States. I know that Canada has a huge issue with many of them infiltrating there, finding haven in Canada, and then being outed. And I know the Canadian government decided to get rid of any tentacles of the Iran regime, particularly the family members of the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard. But I have not heard of one name of one individual that has been thrown out of the country who has been asked to move. And we know that they set up in Toronto, in Vancouver. These are places that they love to live and frequent and have homes in, second homes in. But that's what's going on. The tentacles of Iran's regime are reaching everywhere. Their money, their influence, their terrorism is spreading all over the world.
You know, it's not often that the Democrats and Republicans agree on anything, but lawmakers from both parties agree on blaming China for the worldwide fentanyl crisis. They say the Asian nation has been helping to fuel the ongoing crisis for many years now.
Yeah, so prior to this latest news story, the Democrats have always been fearful of putting too much pressure on China for fear of political retaliation, right? Wanting to work together with China, wanting to make nice with China, particularly in light of more recent developments. Now they've realized that this kindness to China is not getting us anywhere, and the fentanyl crisis is absolutely out of control. So finally, we have bipartisan support on something that's very important in Washington. Perhaps a little too late, Hal, when you have fentanyl in all of our suburbs reaching all the way up to Canada. I know that we have an issue of this pass along scenario, but all throughout the suburbs of the United States, you have record number of teens and preteens dying of overdose. These are kids who are trying things for the very first time, and they think something is very, kind of benign, and trying to, experiment with it, and end up dying in overdoses. They're finally cracking down, whether it was China getting the fentanyl to the border or now getting the ingredients to the Mexican cartels, and then they're making the fentanyl and passing it through. Regardless, it is spreading like wildfire, and it has to stop. So if we finally have some bipartisan support on this, but again, what will this this warning, this stern warning to China really do? We shall see.
A chief with the CIA says he doubts that China will actually invade Taiwan, even though China's President Xi Jinping instructed his military to be ready to invade the country by the year 2027. Now, Lisa's CIA Director William Burns says, I doubt it's going to happen. Why do you think he says that?
It's interesting because when it comes to China, we should watch their actions and not their words. Not even their words. I mean, their hesitations, as President Biden and now the CIA chief have said. So President Biden met with Chinese President Xi Jinping about 3 months ago for about 3 hours. He walked out of the meeting, and if you read the meeting notes, the big takeaway was, I don't think they're going to be invading Taiwan. Well, right after that, we saw them beefing up their assets. We saw them doing drills around Taiwan. We saw them really provoking, or at least leading up to an invasion of Taiwan. And now in recent months, we have seen other things. Just today, China decided to sanction Boeing and some other companies for selling to Taiwan. They also have been obviously provoking with military drills and trying to get over airspace in Taiwan. And that sounds like, it looks like a pre-invasion, but I mean, who am I to make some sort of observation like that? It's interesting to watch what this administration does in terms of just going around in circles from, the White House spokesperson. It's just a joke every single day. We are behind the news. We are behind Twitter. We are behind anyone like you and I having this conversation. I mean, it's very irresponsible for our administration to have such poor messaging to tell people, it's not going to be a threat, when in fact it will be a threat. And what is the CIA chief basing his assessments of China not invading Taiwan on? Well, he thinks that when China is meeting with Russia, as they are, they're looking to how difficult this invasion of Ukraine has been, and then they're going to get cold feet and say, it's not going to be worth it. I think the Chinese are a bit more brave than that, but we shall see.
Lisa, it sounds like the United States is committing more money to Ukraine to support Zelensky's war with Russia. Following the one-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Biden administration has committed $2 billion in drones, ammunition, and aid to the Ukrainian government.
Yeah, speaking of failed invasions, here you go, right? A year into this, and there's no end in sight. And the United States, for some reason, feels like we have to commit more and more and more to this. One of the reasons China should, if I were a crazy Chinese dictator, I would say you should invade Taiwan right now. Why? Because the Europeans and the United States, more than anyone else, has really committed and overcommitted its resources to Ukraine, meaning they're not going to be running to Taiwan's aid anytime soon because of that overcommitment to Ukraine. So if there was any good time to invade, this would be it, particularly since Biden's in office for less than 2 years to go. So that is why a lot of people like myself have their eyes on Taiwan and watching the clock until that happens. But as to why we are committing and recommitting more and more money and resources, Zelensky keeps asking for it, and Biden keeps saying yes, some sort of love affair. He visited Ukraine just last week. He visited Ukraine before he visited East Palestine with all of this wreckage and one of the biggest hazmat disasters that we've had in our history here in the United States, hesitated to go down to the southern border. I mean, we have so many crises in this country. If you're a family of four and you can't put food on the table because of the recession we're having, you're not looking to President Biden saying, thank God he went over to Ukraine, and thank God he's giving more weapons and money to Zelensky. So it's bad optics for this White House, that's for sure, bad optics for the president, but we shall see where this war is going and where Putin wants to take it next.
Absolutely. She's our foreign affairs expert and host of the Foreign Desk from Los Angeles. Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for your time today.
My pleasure.